Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is Zach with Below Basic Mechanic. It has been quite a while since I uploaded a video. I've been doing a bunch of troubleshooting on my car. I've had a bunch of issues, and we'll get into those a little bit later in the video, but welcome, and I hope you enjoy this video. The first pieces we're taking off are the plastic parts like the radiator cover and the air filters. As a side note, you can see that as I'm taking off the coolant hoses, no coolant is coming out. I had coolant in the car, but I took one of the hoses off the bottom and drained it before filming this portion. Now we'll move on to the radiators. You can see how dirty the bottom of mine was as I pull it out. We're definitely going to clean that up before reinstalling it. Now we're working on getting the alternator out. After the alternator, we are going to pop the turbos out and then work on the downpipes. The downpipes are a pain to get out. They have to be twisted and pulled, and being in the back center of the engine makes it very annoying to get out. Just the fact of having to lean over and work kind of in that portion of the engine is really the hardest part about that. The turbos are also a little annoying, but they are not near as bad. Okay, so now what we're going to try to get the engine and the transmission taken apart. There's a bunch of bolts, I guess 6 on each side of kind of the transmission or engine, I guess 6 that I've got to take off of there, and then 6 on each side, and then I think 6 or so on the flywheel too. So gonna get to that. I'll take a few pictures and put some stills in there in the video, but I'm not gonna actually film this part. As promised, here's the still picture. You have to rotate the engine to get to the bolts on the inside. Now we're doing a quick little hookup of the new engine and getting it on the engine stand. And bam, just like that, the old engine is out and sitting right next to the new engine. That's a little bit of Hollywood magic for you. I'll explain what happened to the engine videos here in a minute. So here we're just working on moving a lot of the little pieces from the old engine to the new engine. Okay, so here's where we are at. I feel like we are making pretty good progress. I don't know. Going kind of slow, I think, but I'm fairly happy with how it's going. We've just got a lot of the stuff from the V moved on over. I think it's going pretty well. I'm pretty happy. We're going to move the oil spout over and then work on the high pressure fuel pumps. What I'm working towards here is getting the wiring harness moved over, as it's a lot harder to string wire under/around parts after they're already bolted on. Let's take a second to talk about the engine removal clips. So unfortunately, the clips for me pulling the engine out and dropping it back in are unusable. When I was pulling it out, I was standing in front of the camera the whole time, and you can't actually see anything, so I deleted the whole thing. And then when I was putting it back in, I think I had my buttons backwards, and so I turned the recording off when I went to lower the engine in. So unfortunately, the kind of two most interesting portions of, or what should be two of the most interesting portions of the video, I did not get recorded. Okay guys, so I have the wiring harness 99% done. It looks to me like there's a few wires that go under the intake manifold. Before I can get the wiring harness off, I need to move the intake manifold over. So I'm going to hoist this up on my little ghetto crane here. Hopefully it's not a bad idea. I don't know. I'm going to have to be working under it, which is not ideal, but I guess we'll see. My goal through the next minute of this video is still to get the wiring harness moved over. I have to take off the fuel lines, and as you can see, I'm threading the bolts into the new engine so I don't lose where they go. The engine mounts and a bunch of other parts before I finally get it moved over. I didn't put the video of moving the wiring harness itself over, as it was pretty boring. It's just a lot of me walking around in a circle trying to get it positioned correctly on the new engine. And I'm trying to move everything as directly over to the new engine as I can, but I do end up with a lot of parts on the floor that are waiting for the wiring harness. So as you can see, after the wiring harness is off the old engine, it looks a lot cleaner. Now we're working on pulling the injectors and are going to be working on the steps necessary to get them installed into the new engine. Now I'm only showing a little bit of the injectors as it's kind of boring. You know, you take the old rings off and put the new rings on, and I have this kit where it has these knurled compression tools, and you put it on there and leave it on there, and it compresses the silicone, I think it is, the silicone piece down. I think they worked okay. I also tried the pin caps, and the pin caps worked almost as well. I think the metal pieces worked a little bit better, but barely any, and in my opinion, not worth the extra money of buying them. Now we're working on installing the injectors. First I need to pull out the plugs, keeping the junk out of the cylinders, and after letting the rings compress for a while, I can slide them right into place. This ended up being easier than I thought it was going to be, although it probably helped that the engine is out of the car and I have plenty of room. Not really a normal luxury when working on BMWs. Now that the injectors are installed, we can get back to installing parts and weaving the wiring harness all over. Here we are working on the high pressure fuel lines, hooking them up to the injectors. After the fuel line is in place, we can get quite a bit of the wiring harness put back together on this side of the engine, and this is starting to look pretty good. And more wiring work, and more wiring work, and more wiring work, and I think you get the idea. There is a lot of wiring harness work when moving parts from one engine to another. I'm really only showing half of the engine. Both sides were fairly similar, and when proof watching this video, I was bored watching both sides, so I cut it down to one. Okay, on to a few more parts from the front of the engine, then we'll take the flywheel off, and then it's curtains on the old engine. It's getting packed up and driven back to BMW for the core charge. I talked to BMW, and they said if I took the head off the old engine, they wouldn't give me the core charge back. I really wanted to know what exactly had gone wrong, and so I almost did it, as I'm pretty sure I could get it back together well enough they couldn't or wouldn't care, but I decided not to risk a couple grand. As I assembled the intercoolers, let's talk about some of the issues I had while doing the engine change. I had quite a few, unfortunately, and it's been a long process trying to troubleshoot them and figure out what was causing all the problems, but let's go through them one at a time. So I was having an issue where it was dying at idle. I was having a low power when going slow, kind of when starting up issue. I was getting on and off drivetrain malfunctions, and the short-term fuel trim was running consistently around plus 30%. The last one, I guess the fuel trim isn't really an issue, but it's part of the problems that obviously I need to get fixed. To complicate these, when I was changing the engine, I also put a tune. I got the car tuned, and I put catless downpipes and a new exhaust on. When trying to troubleshoot this stuff, the new exhaust ended up being way too loud. It was crazy loud, and as this is, supposed to be my daily driver, normally is when it's working correctly, it was too loud, and so I ended up going back to the stock exhaust with high flow catted downpipes. Now, after I got the stock exhaust and the high flow catted downpipes on, I could really start to troubleshoot a little bit easier. The car wasn't crazy loud. I could drive it around at night in my neighborhood and stuff like that. So what I did to try to fix the issues, kind of, we'll try to go in order here. So I put in new rear O2 sensors. It helped a bit, but not a ton. I think one of the sensors was starting to lag a little bit, but this definitely wasn't the smoking gun. Didn't help a ton. I didn't like the fit of the new crankcase vent hoses. I thought I had got BMW ones, but I looked back at the order and I had actually bought aftermarket ones. I ordered new BMW ones, put them on, and this helped a ton. It didn't fix everything, but most of the dying at idle went away. So I still had the plus 30% fuel trims. It was occasionally dying at idle, and it still had kind of low power when starting up and going slow. So I replaced the turbo diverter valve. I found a thread online that talked about you get tiny cracks in the turbo diverter valves, kind of on the inside. You can't see them when they're on. And the problems they were describing was very, very similar to some of what I was seeing. So I got new ones, put the new ones on. Sure enough, my old ones had a few very, very small cracks, but still small cracks on them on the inside. And that did seem to fix the low power problem. Let's take a quick break from talking about the issues and talk about the downpipes. You can see here, these are the catless downpipes. These go in and out super easy. I don't have a video of me putting them in. They because they're so much smaller than the stock ones, they just slide right in and out. Super easy, and it's pretty nice. The high flow catted ones I end up with are similar. They're They do have some of the bulkiness of the stock ones, so they're not quite as easy, but it's not near as hard to get in and out as the stock ones. Now let's get back to the issues that I'm having with the car. So I still have some problems I'm working with. So I go through troubleshooting and I'm looking at a bunch of things. I tested the vacuum lines, could not find any leaks. I tested the low pressure fuel pumps. The gauge looked a little odd. It was doing some swings that I wasn't expecting. Nothing super crazy, but I thought the filter might be plugged. I pulled it out and ended up replacing it just because I didn't want that to be the issue, and because it didn't look super plugged to me, I didn't replace it. So I ordered another one and I replaced it, but that didn't help. I did a smoke test, well, kind of a ghetto one, with a canning jar, a rag, some oil, and a soldering iron. Couldn't find anything doing that either. Still couldn't find the issue, so I replaced the high pressure fuel pumps. That was probably the biggest waste of money that I've done on the whole thing. It was no help. I shouldn't have done it. Looking at my charts and stuff, it didn't look like they were bad or anything. I just couldn't really figure out what else it could be. So I did end up replacing those, but that did not help at all. After that, I took it into a shop and got the tune taken off at the same time. The shop found a loose ground, which stopped the drivetrain malfunction issues. And then with it being stock, I thought that the fuel trim issue now might be the lack of tune coupled with the high flow downpipes. So I took it to a different shop that does dyno tunes, asked them to put a stage 2 dyno tune on it. I didn't really want to waste my first tune, but I also wasn't convinced that the tune wasn't part of the issue. So the shop put the dyno tune on and called and said that when they got the tune on, the dying at idle came back with a vengeance. I guess every mile or so it was dying, not even always at idle, they said. So they troubleshot it for a little bit and then came back and said that they had done a smoke test where they decoupled the downpipes on the bottom of the car from the exhaust and was pushing smoke back up them. And one of the turbo connections was leaking on one of the downpipes, and the turbo itself was leaking on the other one. So with having these, I guess, 2 leaks, one on each side, currently I'm working on getting some remanufactured turbos and am hoping this is going to fix the issue. Really, the dying at idle that came back and the fuel trim seems like both should go away when I get the new turbos and stuff. So I'm hoping this fixes it, and I will let everybody know how this all turns out. Now I just put in those intake air pipes, and you can see the blue anodized piece I used on the left-hand side, the passenger side. And that made it very hard to get in. It was hitting on the vacuum line connection piece that's on the turbo. The driver's side didn't have any issues like that going in, but the passenger side was a real pain to get in. Now, to me, this is really satisfying. I enjoy putting the plastic pieces back on for some reason. It's just like I am almost done, and I just find I guess I get a lot of enjoyment out of putting these back on. I guess I honestly think the enjoyment comes from the project being almost done, and I'm getting excited and ready to use my car again. Now we're just messing around with the rubber sealant a little bit, and whoopsie, it doesn't quite fit. I didn't quite get it far enough along. Should have started at the one edge and didn't, so got to redo that. Nothing, doesn't take very long. BMW stuff goes together pretty well like that. I do like that about their sealing pieces like that. Now trying to get the heat shielding in around the turbos and the new downpipes was kind of a pain. You would think with less, I guess, surface area of the downpipes that it would be easier, but the O2 sensor holes were actually in different areas, so I was having a real problem trying to get everything to line up. But I mean, it is aluminum and it bends pretty easy, so we just kind of bent it to how we needed it to be, and now we're screwing it into place. Something to note, because it doesn't have the big cat, the big cats on it, the O2 sensors in the top don't actually fit in those heat shielding cups anymore. I had to take the cups out and just stick the O2 sensors in there. So there's, I guess, a hole in the heat shielding now. Now I'm reinstalling this black cover. I don't know if you guys caught it earlier, but a few minutes ago I did install it and then had to re-uninstall it to get the heat shielding in. Not a very big mistake for sure, but lots of little mistakes like this definitely took up some time on the project. And I did cut out most of the footage of me screwing around with the O2 sensors trying to get them in, but I did end up having to take the cups out just to get them threaded in. They didn't stick far enough down in there with the cups in to get them threaded in. Now we're back to installing plastic pieces. We have the air filters, the inlet air piping, and the driver's side plastic cover to put in. The inlet air piping, I think, is supposed to be fairly hard to put in. Mine has been in and out enough that the pieces just kind of slide in and out the little tabs, which that makes it kind of nice, but it's probably not as good of a seal as it should be. If you've made it this far in the video, you obviously don't mind listening to me talk about how much dumb stuff I do that causes me issues down the line. I'd really appreciate a like and or subscribe if you think I've earned it. Thanks.